Actually, I'll pray first. Father, yeah, we just thank you for this day. We just thank you for this new cycle of time and your appointed times. I just pray that you would prepare your body for the days ahead, prepare us for the feast, and prepare our hearts. Just thank you for all you have done. We thank you for your death, burial, and resurrection, and that we, through the Ruach, can walk more closely just like you walked. And I just pray that we would continue to press into the things you have for us. I pray this would edify and build up and the body. And just thank you for everyone on or who will listen to this recording later on. In Yahushua's name, amen. All right, we're ready to get going here. I'll just go ahead and read Psalm 23, 1 through 3. Yahuwah is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And that could be cycles of righteousness as well. And this is what this is all about. Just kind of getting in sync with our Creator, His appointed times, getting in step with Him. Many of us have different backgrounds, but one of the first appointed times that a lot of people have kept is the Sabbath. And we find out at first, maybe the first couple of weeks. I remember the first time I ever started keeping Sabbath, it was kind of tedious to me at first because I like, what am I doing? But after a while, I wouldn't know what to do without it. So it is definitely a time of rest and restoration. And we're going to be looking at some things today. So, and Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, "This month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of the year for you." It's called Rosh Kodeshim, or the beginning of months, head of the year. Our appointed times are kind of based off solar, lunar. You get to kind of they work to kind of together to be able to figure out the calendar. But it's kind of interesting because it's kind of like I don't know if everyone on this chat has a phone. I'm supposing, I would guess so. But when we look at our phone, looking over my phone right now, it looks pretty simple, and it does. I mean, push the buttons, things happen. But if you start start digging into it, it can be quite complex. And in some ways, the calendar is just like that. It's simple, but it's simply complex. But it's kind of both. It can be very, very complex, but at the same time, it can be simple once you see the rhythms and how he has created creation in different cycles. It's part of the restoration plan as well. So the appointed times. We may have some Q&A at the end of this. I'll have an overview here in a second, but I know for those that use the spotted moon or sighted moon, a little controversy even right now as we speak about what's going on. So anyways, I do want to make one comment because yesterday, for those who were on yesterday, I had mentioned that this first month is a 29-day month, and I was incorrect. So I want to address that up front. I don't know what I was looking at. Thought I was looking at the right year. But I went back, and the reason why that's important is because if it was a 29-day month and you didn't cite it, then it would drop the calendar down to 28, and then you're kind of way off. But I went back and looked, and it was a 30. So there is it's a little bit more. It's a little different than what I was anticipating, because we're going to actually look at some calendar stuff today. But anyways, I just wanted to correct that right up front from yesterday. So this first, there's more days in this month than I was thinking. So anyways, here's the kind of Moedim. So we're going to be looking at a very interesting topic. This may be fascinating, may open some different studies, and that's kind of the point. I know when I came into this walk, one of the first things I kind of ran into is studying like the Sabbath and whatnot, and the resurrection. I mean, as being involved in evangelism and apologetics, right away, you gravitate towards, the resurrection. Is probably one of the most important events in human history, and you want to better understand it, and whatnot. And for people that would deny Messiah coming out of the grave, I wanted to know as much as I could possibly find out about it. So that was one of my initial motivations for studying the death, burial, and resurrection of Messiah. But as I started looking into it, I discovered some other things that were quite interesting. So it's been quite a journey, and you may find some of this information completely new, and that's fine. Just take your time, study it out. Like I was mentioning yesterday, we really need to define things with the scripture. I know there's a lot of videos that say a lot of different things. I mean, you can find an opinion for almost on anything, but um, long story short, we have to define things. Hopefully, we're living by the word, and ultimately, Yahusha is the Word made flesh. And yesterday, I was really trying to focus in on that. Like, hey, many of us that are coming to the truth, we needed to not be distracted of going so far. We need to not forget the Redeemer. He is the truth. He's basically he's a person. So we need to have that relationship, that intimacy, and that's where it's at. If we follow Him, if we seek Him, we're going to be keeping his Torah. So don't get so distracted. I know a lot of us, we have come out of the mainstream and like almost like a drunk driver at the wheel, waking up, we kind of go to the other extreme and overcorrect. And sometimes when people do that, they lose sight of the Messiah. And I just warn people that you need to have him. He is center to everything. So really, really important. So all right, let's move in. So overview real quick. This shouldn't take very long. Well, my very long may be, I don't know, an hour and a half. I don't know. We'll see. But actually, I was just flipping through these slides and it was going pretty quick for me when I was just looking at them. But we're gonna go over the day. Omer count just a little bit. I want to actually talk about that later on, in more detail because that is a kind of a controversial piece to the puzzle. Talk about the 3 days, 3 nights, third day, the year, the big picture, Q&A. That's kind of the layout today. So if you have questions, hopefully I have some answers. If not, I guess we're all going to be searching together. So without further ado, let's kind of go ahead and jump on in. Oh, I get this plug in here. Actually, we will visit later on. I'm going to show something from TorahCalendar.com. I'm going to share and show how to navigate and looking at years in question for the death, burial, resurrection. So TorahCalendar.com, great resource. Regardless, it's a really great resource in figuring out the hours, the days, the months, the years, and things like that. But they have a wonderful poster, very detailed on the events laid out in the scripture. And so if you can go to their website and just, I printed off a big giant one for my family, but it's everything on the site's free. So you can just take it, maybe a Shabbat, study the scriptures and how they link together. It will help a lot of the controversy between Matthew, Mark, and Luke in the book of John. Yesterday, I was kind of mentioning a lot of people, maybe they'll go with, because it seems like the counts may be different, but as soon as you realize some things about John, it all syncs together. I'll just give one example right now because I'm looking at the poster. John 13, the beginning of the chapter, is actually the day before the Passover. It literally says it right in the text. And later on in the chapter, it flips over to the Passover. You can tell by the events if you study it very closely. So I'm giving you kind of a hint that there's some things there that are very interesting. So the references, where they're broke off, it does fit together like a puzzle. So highly recommend checking that out. You probably won't. It'll take a while to study through all those verses and how they're kind of linked up, but very, very good resource. Also, Todd Bennett has a book, probably the best book I have read on the appointed times in our movement as a whole. But he has a really interesting section at the end of this book, specifically with the Messiah and the Messiah and the Moedim. I think it's just really encouraging. And so if you want to know more about how Messiah fulfilled, the Moedim. Is a really, really good book. So, and it tells you, when they are and all that stuff too. So, those two resources I highly recommend in your studies. So we're going to just jump right in with the day of the resurrection. And whenever so this is, by the way, this, hopefully for some of you that if in your studies, if you come to this conclusion, this truth, this is a powerful tool. I mean, this is a game stopper for a lot of people, because the number one reason why people do not keep the Sabbath, I'll just flat out say it. When I talk to people, they say, well, since the resurrection happened on Sunday, we keep Sunday. We don't keep the Sabbath because this, the Lord's day. And it's the number one reason I hear. And in my study, as well, obviously, if you probably signed up for this, it says Sabbath Resurrection Made Simple. So there is a completely different view of this, but it will definitely challenge someone. And as we go through this, it'll probably help. But one thing I like to do right off the bat when I'm talking to people is talk about the 3 days and 3 nights, because it's so easy a thing to do, take them through a kind of a hand test where I have them literally use their fingers, their hands, and count out the whole typical scenario of the so-called Good Friday to Easter Sunday count, because it flat out doesn't work. And if you're watching, I'll just kind of go through it. But I normally have people do this with their fingers, have them literally do this, and as their brain's kind of working, it's like, wow, they go, something's not adding up, and that's exactly right. And it should cause you to want to dig deeper and figure out what's going on. So just so you can see, the whole, it's kind of hard to get all on the screen here. So if we count, I don't even care how you count it. There's no way you can get 3 days, 3 nights from Good Friday to Easter Sunday, period. So Good Friday, Friday day, Friday night, Saturday day, Saturday night, Sunday day, Sunday night. So you're at Sunday night, and now, you're going into Monday morning, and it doesn't matter how you try to fit that in there, it's not going to happen. And so what a lot of people do, and unfortunately, even in our movement, they go, well, it really doesn't matter about the 3 days and 3 nights, when Messiah himself says, basically, this is the sign you get of, authenticating himself. Like his whole ministry is, this is the sign he gives. And people just kind of, oh, you don't need that. It's like, whoa, wow. So if you hear people say that, you might as well throw that teaching in the trash, because it's absolutely ridiculous. I know a lot of calendars. There's 2 references. Not only a lot of people don't know this 3 days and 3 nights is also mentioned in the book David, in First Samuel, I think it's chapter 30, where the whole Ziklag issue, where he came back and the camp was taken, and they were going to kill David, and then he said, bring the I think the ephod and all that stuff, and they prayed, and Yah said, pursue. And as they were pursuing, they crossed the river Besora, which is interesting, the good news, and they found I believe it was an Egyptian or somebody, Ethiopian or somebody, that had not eaten for 3 days and 3 nights, and he was revived. And so this is another reference to the 3 days and 3 nights beyond Jonah. So anyways, yes, if you don't have 3 days and 3 nights, you do not have the correct chronology, period. So I'm sorry for those who, a lot of people that, follow a lunar Sabbath, or, different, they're going to have, it's going to be impossible for them to figure, out the historical chronology. So, and same thing with in mainstream Christianity, it doesn't work. So, if it doesn't work, then you need to dig deeper and see what the scripture actually says. And that's what we're going to do. So right away, when I say Sabbath resurrection, most time people look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Haven't you read, in the scripture here? Yes, I have. I'll just read one of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it doesn't really matter if you have a King James, all these are going to pretty much say the same thing. Matthew 28:1, and at the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulcher. Now, this is interesting because So this is pretty common, first day of the week, first day of the week, first day of the week. You'll notice at least the King James, the other versions sometimes don't do this, but at least the King James italicizes the word day. It's not there in the Greek. So whenever you see italicized in the King James or in some versions, it's not in the original. So they insert it into the text. Another thing that's really fascinating, some of these, like in Matthew's, it actually has the word Sabbath at the like in the end of the Sabbath. That word is actually repeated twice in the sentence. You may find that interesting as you study this. You're like, what? And same thing at the end of Luke chapter 23. It says they rested according to they rested, for the Sabbath, and then it's repeated. The same exact Greek word here in a second, as we're going to look at, is repeated. So let me move can't see my screen here. So when we look, let's see if I can move this little bar out of the way. So when we look under the text, I just have Blue Letter Bible up here. I'll show a few other tools you can look at. There's tons of Greek things you can look at the text, but in the yellow highlighted or underlined area in the Greek there is Mia Ton Sabbaton. And when you look up these words, Mia means earth, and Sabbaton is G4521. And when we excuse me real quick, I need a drink of water. When we look up this word and how it's used, like the only time the translators translate it, so here. So the only time the translators translated week is at the end. Actually, one time in Luke, which says they fast twice a week, and they translated that Sabbaton there too as a week. But the only place they're translating this week is what happens to be with the death, burial, and resurrection of Messiah, and that's kind of interesting. Why did they go? The primary meaning of this word is always the Sabbath, the day of rest, and it not only would not actually, if you would translate it even just literally, it should say the first of the week of the week, not the first day of the week, first of the week. But it's not even that. They have to insert the word day to even make it kind of make sense what they were trying to aim for. But I bring that out that this word is actually Sabbath. And normally you would use the primary meaning of a word. This whole math issue is going to come back to this with the 3 days, 3 nights. So a lot of translations translate this completely different. Maybe this is the first time some of you are watching this have seen. I'm going to show like 3 or 4 different translations of using a more literal translation of the Greek on the eve of the Sabbath at dawn towards the first of the Sabbaths. This Mia Ton Sabbaton, the first of the Sabbaths. And this is repeated throughout, and Young's literal translation does this in all these places. So you'll have to do your own research. Don't believe my word for it. You're going to look it up yourself, because I was actually shocked when I started realizing this years ago. Another translation, let me move this out of the way. I can actually move whoa. Okay. Can you guys still hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, just want to make sure. I thought I cut myself. So the Good News of Messiah translation also does the literal translation throughout, and they make a really good argument for even the fasting twice a week. Every single time, this is like, there's a couple other times in the book of Acts, in the book of Corinthians, that talks about meeting on the first day of the week. It's the same thing. It's Mia Ton Sabbaton, in different forms, slightly different. And this is really interesting, because it's in context. When you realize the context of Acts and Corinthians and what Paul was saying, he wanted to be there for Pentecost, and you'll know here in a second what that the first of the Sabbath meaning here in a second, it makes perfect sense when you actually translate literally the first of Sabbath in context. He's trying to be somewhere by a certain time. It's a time reference. It's a very specific time reference. So it's not just a Sabbath. I'll put it that way. It's a special Sabbath. Also, the Greek Interlinear Bible does the same exact thing. They translate it the first of the Sabbaths. And this is a great, like, wow, what is going on here? So when I first discovered this, I was like, whoa, this is interesting. Now, this is also kind of fascinating. In the Greek, they actually use the first day of the week. I mean, or the first day. And they could have easily done that. They could have had the word day there, but they didn't. That's also, even though it's a kind of an argument from silence, it's still the fact they use it in other places in the New Testament, the first day, of certain things. They could have said the first day. Why did the scripture not say it if it could have said it in the Greek? And a lot of historians, they never use that term Mia Ton Sabbaton to refer to the first day of the week. So it's very interesting. The Protus Humera. I can't even see where my okay. On the first day in Mark, this is talking about the first of unleavened bread, the first day of unleavened bread. Also in Acts 20, it also says from the first day. In Protus Humerus, they could have used that. It doesn't show up. They could have used the word day. They didn't do it. So by inserting the word day, it really is interesting because they could have did it in the Greek, but they didn't do it. So same thing with Philippians as well. First day. They could have easily used it in the Greek, and they did not. And you have to ask why. But once you realize the appointed times, and that's the big thing. Most people, and I'll say this because when you're going through studying this, you almost have to be in the Greek because different translations make errors. I'll put it that way, where they try to enhance the text, and the enhancement is actually causing more confusion. And even adding the word day there when it's not there. And I think one translation put festival, just inserted the word festival in a chronology piece. And it's like, whoa, it's not even in the text. So it's very important to look at the scripture very literally. If you take it very literally, you're going to figure out the 3 days, 3 nights is what I'm trying to say. So the first of the Sabbath, now this part that gets quite controversial in the Hebrew roots movement, because a lot of people have been taught to count the Omer a certain way, and in reality, there's a number of ways. There's a number of different camps on this, and whatnot. And this teaching per se is not so much on counting the Omer in detail, but I do want to make reference to one view in light of what we're talking about here. So this makes a little bit of sense, but at some point, I may do a thorough examination of this because I was taught a different way of counting before I came to understand the death, burial, and resurrection of Messiah. So, what I'm referring to, you count 7 Sabbaths going out to Shavuot, or the Pentecost, the Feast of Weeks. Now, in the law, it talks about there's 3 things that happen. You count 7 weeks. And I believe those are what's called common weeks. They're not like perfect weeks, where perfect week is like from the first day to the Shabbat. That is from creation. But a common week is just any 7-day pattern. Like maybe if someone's unclean, touch a dead body, you're unclean for 7 days. It doesn't really matter what day it happens. You become unclean, 7-day period. Women have a monthly cycle. It doesn't matter what day it lands on. It's 7 days. So that's more of a common versus a perfect, going back to the creation. That 7, that perfect kind of ties into that number 7 in the original week. So long story short, the reason I bring that up, because it's called the Feast of, not Sabbaths, weeks. And I believe it's actually referring to common weeks. But in that, you are actually counting 7 perfect Sabbaths, or I think in this version it says, shall be complete. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. And if you look at that in the Hebrew, it's very interesting it's almost like the text is actually singling out what type of Sabbath you're supposed to be counting, because it could be very confusing in the text, because in this particular text, it's connected to there's two other Sabbaths that are possible, the first and last day of unleavened bread. I just want to show you something real quick. So when you so the 14th is Passover, which we talked about yesterday. Then the 15th is unleavened bread, and the 21st is also unleavened bread, and or 15th through the 21st. And technically, if you just say unleavened bread, even Passover is the day of unleavened bread, because you eat unleavened bread with the Passover. But the festival of unleavened bread is from the 15th to the 21st, and has some other additional right rulings with that. But my point of what I'm trying to pull out for what we're teaching today is that the first day, the 15th and the 21st, are considered rest days, and I'll just flat out say they're also Sabbaths. A lot of people will argue that point. Hopefully, when we look at the next slide, we'll be able to see that yes, there's ancient documents that definitely say that the first day of unleavened bread is, in fact, a Sabbath, and uses it in the text. And long story short, the reason I'm bringing this up, because there's a little bit of confusion with you got to read Leviticus 23 in context. So here is one place. So this is the scripture version, and he talking about the priest shall wave the sheaf. This is that Omer wave offering before Yahuwah for your acceptance. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. So most people in the I would say Hebrew roots movement, when we're taught this, and I was taught this way too, that this is talking about the weekly Sabbath. Okay, you have the weekly Sabbath, the day after the weekly Sabbath. That's always first day of the week, and he waves it. Yeah, that's how everyone understands it. But if you go to the Septuagint and you read that same verse, it doesn't say the morrow after the Sabbath. It says the morrow of the first day, the priest shall lift it up. Then later on, or actually, if you go back in the context, right before verse 11, you got to read it in context. It was just talking about the festival of unleavened bread. Remember, there's two Sabbaths in unleavened bread. And I didn't want to actually talk about this too much, but Leviticus 23, right at the beginning, when Yah says, "These are my appointed times," he talks about the Sabbath. Then he says, "These are my appointed times" again. He's almost like, he doesn't stutter, but he repeats himself. What he's doing, he's bracketing the seventh day Sabbath, that weekly cycle, away from the annual Moedim. And there are two distinct cycles, and a lot of people get confused on this, especially lunar Sabbath. I mean, they're mixing up cycles and all sorts of stuff. So, and so when you read this part, there's actually three possibility of three different Sabbaths: the first day, the last day, or the weekly Sabbath. So which one it is? And actually, it's funny because there's people that use all three for counting the Omer. Some people do it after the weekly Sabbath. Some people do it after the first, and some people do it after the seventh Sabbath. So, anyways, the first day, in verse 7, it says, "On the first day you shall have a set apart gathering. You shall do no work." So, later on in the Septuagint, it literally, and I don't even have the verse here. It literally will flip and call this first day the Sabbath. So, in context, it's actually kind of referring to this. So, one view of understanding how this is done is the day after the high Sabbath, the 15th. And I have a lot of information on this that would probably blow your mind. I'm not going to do all the information right here, because it's not the. I'm going to wait to present all that information, but I did want to show a few pieces, because it's not going to make sense to a lot of people that how can it be the first Sabbath the Omer wave offering hasn't happened yet? And that is actually the reason why I'm bringing this up. Also, Joshua chapter 5, they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at evening on the desert plain of Jericho, and they ate of the stored grain of the land on the morrow after a Passover, unleavened bread and roasted grain in the same day. That's the day, the morrow after this, the 15th. Remember, you can't touch you have to have the Omer before you partake of the harvest. Must be waived. And the manna ceased on the day after they had eaten the stored grain. Why would Yah stop the manna from ceasing on day 16 of month 1 is because they are allowed to reap the harvest that came into the land, and now they're officially allowed to take of the harvest. And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahuwah for your acceptance. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest waves it. And there's a lot of other stuff like Josephus, for example. He doesn't mean the historians flat out say but on the second day of unleavened bread, which is the 16th day of the month, is when they first partake of the first fruits of the earth. So I really don't care what the historians say, but it is when you look at all the scripture and all the astronomical information, some of these other things and all this other information, you're like, wow. And the death, burial, resurrection of Messiah, it's like, yeah, I think maybe we need to reconsider, especially Paul, who was a Pharisee, and this is the way they reckon things. We don't see any time where he affected his understanding of that per se. So anyways, let's go on ahead. 3 days and 3 nights. Whereas Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. We talked about when a day starts yesterday. We have what's called the unified day, the Yom HaKab, the 24-hour period, where it actually starts at sundown, goes sundown, it goes evening, night, morning, day. So, and then you have the day portion, which is the light portion. Anyways, here's the 3 days and 3 nights. And by the way, I actually recently, not too long ago, bought a video, was 7 hours long on Passover. Went through the whole thing. Yeah, and I will say it was good. Like the heartbeat of the message of Messiah's work and redemption was excellent in that. Not the mic off.
Boys.
Okay, I think that may help. You guys can hear now. I lost my thought. What was? Sorry, what was I just saying? Let me back up here for a second.
You were talking about doing a 7-hour teaching on Passover.
Okay, I was listening to a 7-hour teaching on Passover. Yeah, I know what I was going to say, and it was good in the sense that it had the heartbeat of the message of Messiah. And I would like to actually spend time and talk about, the heart of, the death, burial, and resurrection and what it really means for us in that sense. But the kind of interesting thing is when it came to the 3 days and 3 nights, right at the end of the video, he referred out to someone with a PhD. He's like, well, I'll let someone with a PhD explain the 3 days and 3 nights. And I almost laughed. I was like, oh my goodness gracious, you gotta be kidding me. If you have to have someone have a PhD to explain 3 days and 3 nights, you probably don't have it. It's not that hard. And I will say most of the Hebrew roots calendars are absolutely wrong in this, because they'll say 3 days and 3 nights. And you could actually get online right now and Google it, and the first thing that pops up is probably going to be incorrect, but they'll say 3 days and 3 nights on their little poster, but when you actually look at the poster, it's 3 nights and 3 days. And most people wouldn't even know that there's a difference. 3 nights and 3 days is not 3 days and 3 nights. It's a difference of 12 hours. You're going to be off every single time. Even though the Hebrew days start at, the unified day starts in the evening, the prophecy specifically says 3 days and 3 nights. So if you twist the scripture, guess what? You're not going to get the answer. So anyways, when you realize if it's Mia Sabbaton, the first of the Sabbaths, if we take the scripture very literal and don't add to it days, like the words like day, or insert, last meaning of words, and I can actually argue every single time that is translated that way, that it could be Sabbath. If we just translate it strictly from the Greek, Mia Sabbaton, then we can know exactly when the 3 days and 3 nights started. And I just want to go through that real quick because it's real simple. I would hate to have you go through a teaching and they don't teach you a 7-hour teaching, not know when the 3 days, 3 nights were. So day and Hebrew days, according to Genesis 1, is when the sun is ruling. The sun the greater light rules the day. and the lesser light rules the night. So day 1 would be on the 14th. Night 1 would be the high Sabbath of the 15th. Day 2 would be the day portion of the 15th. Day 16th would be start of that night would be night number 2. Day 3 would be the day portion of the 16th. Now here's where it gets interesting. We have now we have the third night, and this is what we would begin the Sabbath. But Messiah would have came out if the sun has risen. If the sun comes up, it is officially another day. And that's why the scripture goes out of its way to tell you it was still dark. And when they came, he was, he was gone. And that is really, really important from a chronology point of view. It's really detailed. And that's why I'm recommending you guys to really study that poster, because it is definitely, it's 3 days and 3 nights. But this is also interesting because 3 days, 3 nights is not the third. It will land on the third day, but it's not the same prophecy. And a lot of people get confused about this. If something happens on the third day, it's within 72 hours. If something is 3 days and 3 nights, it has to you have to have that part filled. It's on the 4th day. And matter of fact, there's 2 places in scripture where the resurrection is after the third day. In Mark, I think it's 8:31. You can look it up yourself right now. It says after 3 days. So the after 3 days is actually tied into the 3 days, 3 nights. It's a 4th day, because when you start on Passover, you count over, it's actually 4 days, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I bring that up because the third day prophecy is also unique. So there's 2 separate prophecies that end exactly on the same day. So the resurrection would happen on the 17th, Shabbat. So the third day, I guess I missed that. It's saying the son, a man has to be delivered into the hands of sinners and impaled, and the third day rise again. So what's the third day? Easy peasy. Once you know the feast, you'll know what it is. The first day of unleavened bread is the 15th. The second day of unleavened bread is the 17th. And always, the 17th day of the first month is the third day of unleavened bread. So the third day is, in fact, the third day of unleavened bread. So, and this is a very important historical date, because if you study the Exodus, there's something very interesting that happened. Remember yesterday we were talking about they came out on the 15th of Ramses at night. That means it's impossible for that to be the Passover, because Passover night they had to stay in their home. And it was the 15th night they left. It literally tells us the day they left in Numbers 33:3. Then in Deuteronomy 16:1, 16:6, Exodus 12:42, and a whole bunch of other places, it tells they left that night, the 15th. It was a watch night, so it makes it impossible to be the Passover. But what I wanted to say is, the 15th they were they left Ramses. The 16th they were in Sukkot, and then the 17th they were at Etham, and they pick up something very important for the travels, to keep protect them on their way. And I'll have you maybe study that out yourself. But also on the flip side of the calendar, what's on what happened in Genesis on the 17th day of the 7th month? Does anyone know? What happened on the 17th day of the 7th month back in the book of Genesis? On the flip side of the calendar, exactly on the opposite side of the calendar. The ark rested on Mount Ararat. So there's a lot of interesting correlations with this anyway. So this is when they were on the road to Emmaus. 3 days. Today's the third day since what events? Since he died on Passover. Third day since. So you can see the 4 days when they're there. There's also some interesting things. It's kind of interesting. That slide, I didn't even put that slide in this show, and it's here. So that's kind of fascinating. But anyways, that's interesting. So the year, this part is really fascinating. This is what actually, help me just believe the scripture literally, is the year part. This astronomical stuff is awesome. So actually something's not quite right here. Okay. I think my slides are flipped around a little bit. So in Luke, it tells us that in the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar, it gives us time reference of the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Then later on, and it then talks about John, and in the same chapter, it talks about Messiah being about 30 years of age. And both understanding the age of John and the age of Messiah, this 15th year Tiberius Caesar is really, really important. Well, you could Google this. I mean, almost everyone knows that Tiberius Caesar started somewhere around 14 CE. So if you count forward to the 15th year Tiberius Caesar, you're going to land 28 CE. Well, if you know that Messiah is about, because it does say he's about 30 years of age, you can actually count backwards and get the birth. So if you count backwards from 28 CE to the birth, you're in year 3. Now, I'm not going to get into all the astronomical things with this and Daniel's prophecy on this teaching, but I'm going to tell you right now, the priesthood, the revelation sign in Revelation 12, even though I think this is a dual prophecy, but this sign, this exact sign on Yom Teruah in 3 BCE happened, and it is not only tied in, there's 2 different things that link in together. Not only the revelation sign, but Daniel's 70-week prophecy, they link in, and the priesthood, since we know what course was in operation in 70 CE when the temple was destroyed, the first course, if you understood what, you could retro calculate the courses of the priesthood to figure out when Zechariah was serving in the temple, the 8th course of Abiyah, to figure out how old John was. So anyways, or at least give a really good idea to be able to help figure out Messiah's birth. Anyways, I'm just saying there's a lot of information that I'm not covering that really link this in. And it is really, really powerful when you consider it's exact, like this sign, like you go one day in either direction, it's not this. I mean, it doesn't exist. So that it is exact. So it's not just like, well, kind of. No, kind of nothing. I mean, astronomy is exact. So this is really, really fascinating. Well, the reason why I wanted to bring this up in the first place is if we know the start of Messiah's ministry, we'll start in 28 CE, and we know that Pontius Pilate was done in 36. And I probably should put a historical reference here when he was removed. I would like to look at.
I was wondering how many people.
I think someone needs to mute. I can find out. Okay. Anyways, what I want to do is I'm going to get off of this or log off of the. I'm going to actually go to the internet. I'm going to show you some things. I'm going to take you through. I think it's worth your eyeballs seeing all the years in question, and it's going to, 2 things are going to be revealed to you that is actually shocking. Maybe more than that once we go there. But I'm going to stop sharing this for a second. I'm going to share something different. Okay, so I'm on tourcalendar.com, and I'm going to show you how to navigate this site because I'm going to tell you right now, there's no site like this anywhere else. I mean, there's nothing like it. Period. So you can literally type any year in here. I'm going to go just 28 CE so you guys see what's going on. I want you to see this with your own eyes. So if we go back, and so there's 2 things that I was curious when I first did the research for this is I wanted to find out if, where is this resurrection year with Mia Sabbaton? And the other question is, how many times does a Thursday Passover happen? Because the only way you can have a Sunday resurrection is on a Thursday Passover, and you can count it out yourself. And a lot of institutes like Answers in Genesis, or if anyone that knows how to count to 3, basically, that you have to have the Passover on a Thursday. That's the only way you're going to get a Sunday resurrection, period. And if you don't understand that, then talk to me afterwards and we can count it out. But you have to have a Thursday Passover in order to have a Sunday resurrection. Well, you're going to discover two things. Not only the year that the Passover happened in the middle of the week to have a Mia Sabbaton, but something else emerges that for me is like, wow, this is incredible. So I'm going to just, I'm going to show these. I know this maybe seem a little tedious, but maybe by showing this, you'll be able to navigate around the site too and know how it works. So I'm going to scroll down. So you probably should know that Passover is on the 14th day. This is 28 CE. And that's not what we're looking for. So we're looking for something, by the way, this is like a calendar. This is day number 1 way over here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and Shabbat over here. So Passover is on the 3rd day. So that's not what we're looking for. So 28 is out of the question. I mean, that's not where we're going. I'm going to purposely go out to the home page. So I'm going to type in another one. Later on, I'm not going to do this, but I'm just showing you, you could type in any date. Like I could even type in the year of the Exodus real quick and show you what that looked like if I wanted to. But I'll just keep going through here. So we did 28. You can even choose the month, like whatever month you want to look at. Maybe we want to look at the 7th month, but right now we're looking at the 1st month. So I'm going to just go here, view the calendar, scroll down. So we're in 29. Passover lands, yeah, on a 2nd day or a Monday in our understanding. But yeah, so definitely the 17th. Yeah, that's not going to work with anybody. So anyways, 29 out of the question. I'm going to actually go a different way to do this, make it a little bit quicker. So we're going to look at 30 CE. So 30 CE, Passover is on a Friday. Now, I will say this, 30 and 33, which you'll see here in a second, this would be the scenario of the chronology a lot of people will use for, the Good Friday, Easter Sunday thing, but the math doesn't work at all. So you see the 17th way over here. 17th is it's the resurrection date period. You get 3 days, 3 nights, and all the prophecies that fit together. Because the only way you're going to get the Easter chronology is if you destroy the scripture. Basically, you're throwing out the references to after the 3rd day. You might as well forget the 3 days and 3 nights because there's no way you can smash that in there. And on top of it, you don't even have the 3rd day of unleavened bread when you do that. You only have the 2nd. So anyways, that doesn't work. So back up we go. Actually, let me go out to 31. So 31, what we got? We got Passover, yeah, on a Tuesday. So yeah, that would be yeah. I don't think anyone's thinking Friday resurrection or anything like that. So so we're gonna go to still on 30. Let me go over there. I want to go 32. I know this is kind of tedious, but it's actually good to see. We're on Monday, so that's not going to work. So 33, again, we have it, like I said, I think it's 30 and 33. We have that the 14th being or the 14th is always the Passover. We have the Friday Passover, 17th is on a Monday. So originally, this would be even more problematic if you would have, like, for example, if you had like 3 years where you had the scenario in the scripture or a couple possibilities of the Thursday to Sunday thing. 34 is interesting. 34, it lands definitely in the middle of the week, and it would be Mia Sabbaton there. But I'm going to keep going just to show you the rest all the way up, even though most people don't think it's this long. it's just good to see the years in question. Passover here. The 17th is on a Friday again. 36. And 36 Passover is on Shabbat, and then 17th is on the third day. So there's two amazing things that when you look at the astronomy from 28 all the way to 36, there's only 1 year in that huge span of time that even has one on, in the middle of the week. And I actually believe the middle of the week is actually linked directly into Daniel prophecy in the midst of the week. And a lot of people think it's talking about the anti-Messiah. We'll get there in a second. But long story short, the other thing that's actually interesting as well, there is no Thursday whatsoever Passover in that whole entire span. From an astronomical point of view, it would make it impossible for a Sunday resurrection. And that for me, when I saw that with just a literal scripture, taking the scripture very literally, don't adding words, just what it says, Mia Sabbaton, the first of the Sabbaths, you can take it at face value because I can't find a Sunday resurrection. It doesn't add up, first of all, and we don't find it in astronomy. In the scripture, you have to really add things and redefine things to even make it work. So this to me was quite powerful. Since I'm over here, I'm gonna just show you one other thing. This is just on this site. There's a couple tools. Since yesterday I was talking about the Hebrew day and hours and stuff like that, I'll just show you this real quick. So in Hebrew, in Israel right now, this is live time. So up here, this is a unified day, this whole period here. But the light period here, that's the day, the 12 hours. You got 12 hours of darkness. And right now they're in the 8th hour down here. I don't know if you can see this. Let me scroll this down a little bit. They're in the 8th hour. You can also see, well, they don't have the watches of the night here, but it's a helpful tool. So this is a live site where when it comes to new moon calculations and things like that, very helpful to be able to figure out kind of what's going on. I just want to show you guys this is a kind of a tool on the basics of the calendar. So it's actually today. But they can also show you for example, this is actually it's yesterday, the day before. So on the March 21st, just want to show you this as a tool point. You can see, well, you can't even see the moon. It's below the horizon. So if someone would say, oh, I saw the moon on, March 21st, I would absolutely go, if you were in Israel, that would have been absolutely impossible below the horizon. You can't even see it. So, I mean, obviously someone's being a false witness if they're doing that. Sometimes you can actually tell. I've seen people post pictures before and I've commented, I was like, that's a picture from somewhere else. That's not it. Because you can actually tell by the shape of the way the horns are facing which month it is in. And they go, how did you know that? I was like, yeah, because that is not the new moon of the first month or whatnot. They put a picture of moon of the 7th month instead of the first month. And there's a big difference. So anyways, really cool tool. Kind of like a time machine, and there's a lot of math and science in this. I think they've corrected NASA a couple times on some of their dates. So anyways, great tool for study and whatnot. But I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. I'm about finished here. So get this out. So from that span we just looked at from 28 all the way down, there was only 1 year. There was no Passover there was no Passover on a Thursday, but there was only one time in that whole entire span of time that there was a Passover actually in the middle of the week to even have a 3 days and 3 nights. and third day, Mia Sabbaton, all those scriptures lining up and taking it very literal in 34 CE. So very powerful. Some people have listened to this before, and so they had to rethink everything. So they went back and they looked farther earlier in history, and I think there may be one in like 26 or 20, like super early. But in order to do that, they had to throw out the book of John. They had to get rid of chapter 6. They go, well, we got to get rid of one of these Passovers, and we'll have the whole. We'll try to have it fit, and it doesn't work with the real history. Is really the whole point. And you have to throw out just chapters, times and stuff like that. So it doesn't work. Is my point. So, anyways, the big picture. I'll sum this up real quick. I'm not talking about Daniel's 70-week prophecy today, but I will say this: that there are multiple layers to it, and when you realize when Daniel was praying that he was talking about the covenant. Matter of fact, the word covenant is actually used when Daniel's praying. He's talking about the covenant. So the whole context of him praying is the restoration of Israel, his people. And so the prophecy is not it's not centered around the anti-Messiah. Everyone makes it about the anti-Messiah. It's about Yah's solution to Israel's problem, the coming of the Messiah. And so I highly recommend you to look at this in the Hebrew, because it's very interesting when you're looking at this. And I think there's different layers of understanding to this, but it is interesting when you read 9:27, when it says he shall confirm the covenant, or a covenant in some translations, with many for 1 week. Remember when Messiah, if you understand the Passover and Messiah, that meal he was having, it literally in the middle of that week, he's actually doing that. Matter of fact, earlier up on Daniel, it's talked about he would be cut off. And literally it's interesting, because if he's cut off in the middle of the week and he raises on the Sabbath, which is the last day, the Shabbat, the picture of that is enormous for our hope and resurrection too. Because some people may, this doesn't matter, just as long as I get raised from the dead. And I was like, it does matter, because there are 2 resurrections. Matter of fact, everybody's getting raised from the dead, the righteous and the wicked. So there is a first resurrection that is linked in directly to the plan of Yah. Back in Genesis, there's this ancient prophecy. Yahuwah said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, and he's going astray. He is flesh, and his days shall be 120 shana, or years. And of course, you do any serious study of the scripture, you're going to find out real quick. Obviously, that's not talking about the length of someone's life, because Abraham lived to be 175, Isaac lived to be 180, Levi, I believe 123. I mean, there's a number of people. Jacob 147. I mean, there's a whole list of people that live past 120. I think it's a dual prophecy even with that, because in the book of Yashar it said in the 480th year of Noah's life, this quote here was given to him, and he preached for 120 years and basically had no converts but his family. And the flood waters came. But I feel like it's a dual prophecy for our day, that this word Shana can mean cycles, and one of the cycles of time is the Jubilee cycle, which is a 50-year period. So when Peter says, don't be ignorant, don't let this one matter be hidden from you, that with Yahuwah, a day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. One way you can understand these things together is that he has allotted man 6,000 years. He's allowed him to rule and reign for 6,000 years, but the master of the Sabbath, the Messiah, will reign for 1,000 years. And this is kind of interesting, because in the book of Numbers, I know we a lot of times those who keep the Sabbath, we quote this a lot, Hebrews 4:9, but I think the context is more what this graph is showing than actually the 7th-day Sabbath. So there remains a Sabbath keeping for the people of Elohim. And if you read it, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's like showing a future picture. And actually, every week when we keep the Sabbath, it's a picture of that kingdom, resting in him, trusting in him. Why do you think Messiah did most of his miracles on the Sabbath? It was restoration. Is a picture of what will happen in the resurrection. You will receive a new body. You'll be restored. You'll be refreshed. And Martha said, speaking of her brother Lazarus, speaking to Yahusha, I know he, Lazarus, shall rise again in the resurrection, the last day. What's the last day? The Shabbat. So the last day in the big picture of the plan of Yah is the Shabbat. Blessed and set apart is the one having part in the first resurrection. First, the second death possesses no authority over these, but they shall be priests of Elohim and Messiah, shall reign with him 1,000 years. This first resurrection is connected to the 1,000 years, the master of the Sabbath. So Messiah's resurrection is a foreshadow of the righteous resurrection in that millennial reign, that Sabbath reign. And that's why even thematically it makes more sense. I've talked to even the Amish, and they got this. They're like, wow, that's the second, I guess the Sunday resurrection would be thematically connected to the resurrection of the condemnation. And I think some translations of the damned. So it's the second resurrection. There may be years ago, I thought maybe if there's a judgment, there might be a possibility, but you don't want to be part of the second resurrection. You want to be part of the first resurrection, period. So anyways, even from a thematic point of view, it's really important to understand this. So when the scriptures say, remember, Zakar, remember, it points all the way back to the creation. It's no wonder this is the longest of all the commandments. Remember the Sabbath day to set it apart. 6 days you labor and shall do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahuwah your Elohim. You do not do any work. You nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For 6 days Yahuwah made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that's in them. And he rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahuwah blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart. It was all along. He had a plan, a grid of time, a Sabbath of time plan. So this is all figured out from the beginning. And when you understand the Sabbath resurrection, it's like, wow, that is our hope. He's the first fruits, like that picture of raising out of the grave. So this is, I think, my last scripture here. I want to read this for those who maybe haven't yet decided to grab a hold of Yah. It's definitely time to do so. And thus says Yahuwah, guard right ruling and do. See, I got to move these. I have move this out of the way. Okay. Let me restart. Thus says Yahuwah, guard right ruling and do righteousness, for near is my deliverance to come, or salvation to come, my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man who does this, and the son of man who lays hold of it, guarding the Sabbath lest he profane it, and guard his hand from doing any evil. And let not the son of a foreigner who joins himself to Yahuwah speak, saying, Yahuwah has certainly separated me from his people. Nor let the eunuch say, look, I'm a dry tree. For thus says Yahuwah to the eunuchs who guard my Sabbaths and have chosen what pleases me, to hold fast to my covenant. To give to them I shall give in my house and within my walls a place and a name better than that of sons and daughters. And by the way, what is a place and a name better than sons and daughters? In relationships, what would be higher than sons and daughters? Does anyone know? What place of what was that?
The spouse.
Yeah, the bride, the wife. Yeah. I give them an everlasting name that is not cut off. Also, the sons of a foreigner who joins. Also, the sons of foreigners who join themselves to Yahuwah to serve him, to love the name of Yahuwah, to be his servant. All who guard the Sabbath and not profane it, and hold fast to my covenant. To them I shall bring to my set apart mountain, let them rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their slaughterings are acceptable on my altar. For my house is called a house of prayer for all peoples. The Master Yahuwah, who gathers the outcast of Israel, declares, I gather still others to him besides those who are gathered to him. This goes back actually to the Daniel prophecy, because 70 weeks are determined for your people. Messiah, you got to remember, all the way back to Genesis, where the seed of the woman would crush the head of the enemy, and the Abraham seed, all the nations shall be blessed. Then we get to Yehuda, that a lawgiver would come, and to him would be the obedience of the nations. And then the 70-week prophecy, and when you hear the word 70, you should think right away the nations. And it talks about in Isaiah that this one will come, and he'll be a light to the Gentiles. So in this 77s, this picture of the nations and this perfect plan of Yah, is that Yah's not only going to in the renewed covenant with Israel, but he was going to bless the nations. He is truly the fulfillment of Abraham's promise, promise to Abraham that through your seed, all the nations shall be blessed. So the prophecy of Daniel is so much bigger than the anti-Messiah. People focus on that and don't even realize the context of what the angel was speaking of. So anyways, so this year is kind of unique, since 34 was the year when the Mia Sabbaton, the death, burial, and resurrection of Yahusha. This year, it will be a perfect match. This is one reason why I decided to do this.
Do you think you're gonna wake up the girls early again today, Riley?
Yeah. I'm gonna, like,
Someone's mic's on.
Sounds good.
So this year, the middle of also it lines up just the same way. Like you're gonna have Passover in 3 days, 3 nights later. On Sabbath, on the third day of unleavened bread, on Mia Sabbaton, you have a celebration. So it's pretty powerful and important. And that's all I have for right now. Like I said, there's a lot more information.